On today's episode of the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast, we'll be playing a recording of what happened yesterday at a webinar I was teaching on speaking hypnotically as part of the 3-day hypnosis tasting buffet about how to do neo-Ericksonian hypnosis as part of a launch for a hypnosis class I'm going to be teaching shortly. You're welcome to join us tomorrow, Thursday, the 11th of May, and Saturday, the 13th of May for our next two episodes. The information is down below. And if you miss these classes, I'm sure there'll be replays you can find perhaps in future podcasts or somewhere else. But have a look around at ericksonian.com, and that's one of my websites, and essentialcoachingskills.com. Thanks. You are listening to the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast, a show devoted to uncovering the systems and the secrets that set the best apart, where you learn how to take your coaching clients to the next level, while you grow the coaching practice of your dreams. So sit back and relax, or sit up and get excited. Either way, you might want to pay attention. This could be important. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar, this first day of a hypnosis buffet. We're going to give you a little tasting buffet of Ericksonian or neo-Ericksonian hypnosis. I'll try to explain a little bit more why I call it that as we go along, but I just first want to welcome you for being here. Thank you very much for being here. This is my little humble abode here in the sort of Catskill areas of upstate New York. I don't know if you know anything about that, if it means anything to you or not, but little cabin we've had for a while. And when COVID hit, we just moved up here and have been doing everything online ever since. And it's been kind of wonderful. One of the wonderful things about it is I have one of those here. I don't know if you can see that, that's a piano, but I am a piano player, and living in New York has always been a bit of a challenge to be a piano player because the neighbors would complain no matter how good you were. For some reason, they didn't like it that much. So it's good for me to be here, and I'm glad that you can join me here at this little humble abode of mine. We're going to be talking today about some hypnosis stuff. And this is an area near and dear to my heart. I started off my professional life as a musician and a teacher of piano and a performer in rock bands and various other places. And it was a wonderful transition when I went to first my Tony Robbins workshop in 1985, and then it led me to more and more study of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. But the more I studied NLP, the more it seemed like the guys who were really good, guys, gals, women, men, everybody who was really good at NLP was also able to do Ericksonian hypnosis. And I thought, well, I want to do that. What's that all about? And this fellow came to one of the Tony Robbins workshops I was doing. He was a co-trainer there named Dave Dobson, who did this kind of very deep trance work that I was convinced was Ericksonian. It met all the criteria as far as I was concerned. He was telling stories, he was doing the various things, and boy, did it work. It was really effective. And then when I went out and studied with Dave, because I figured it's good enough for Tony, good enough for me, went out and studied with Dave. He said, no, I don't do Ericksonian hypnosis. I met him once, but I developed my work independently of Milton Erickson. I call it other than conscious communication. Might not have said those sentences exactly, but that's basically what he was communicating. His other than conscious communication was separate and different from, although very parallel to, Ericksonian hypnosis. So I got trained in that from Dave. 2-week fun shop, very different from a 2-week certification course with Tony Robbins. Let me tell you, that's a whole nother story unto itself. But one of the things I learned from Dave there is that some of the stuff they do at NLP trainings is kind of interesting. I'm going to do my best to do this smoothly. I'm going to share my screen with you real briefly. I made a very minimal little PowerPoint presentation to share with you, but I want to show it to you. So here it is. Let me pull up the right screen and see if I can play this. As soon as the box goes away that tells me participants cannot see my screen, I will get to a place where I can play from the start. Okay, so this is one of the things we learn or learned at the NLP communication centers. And that is communication is 7% the words you use, 38% the tonality with which you say it, and 55% the physiology with which you use your body in order to say those words. And I had written down the fellow who's said that. Oh, jeepers. I cleaned my desk very rapidly before the seminar started, so take my word for it. A guy did a study and found out this information. How embarrassing. Anyway, it's been said that it's a flawed study. There's differences in it, but basically it's pretty useful to recognize that any communication is 7% the word choices, 38% how you say it, and 55% the physiology. Let me give you a quick example. If I said to my wife, "Yeah, I'm really happy that your mother is going to spend some time with us, a whole month, that's going to be great." If I said that on a note, just the words, she'd be, "Wow, she's really happy that my mother's coming." But if I said it like, "Yeah, I'm really happy that your mother's coming to spend a whole month with us. That'll be great." That's a different communication. So both my way of saying it, my physiology, but also my auditory communication, very different, right? So communication comes across very differently. So what Dave said is that while NLP spends a lot of time talking about this, then they just spend the rest of their time talking about that 7%, talking about the words that you're saying, not so much how you say them or the communication of the physiology, the other than conscious communication that Dave was talking about, the OTCC, says they spend all their time on that 7%. So he wanted to correct that. And to an extent he did. I will say this about Dave, like Milton Erickson, very much like Milton Erickson, he taught other than consciously, let's just say. He taught in a way that was, I think the best way you can, I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I'll come back to this little tiny PowerPoint I put together for you later, but he taught, in a way that was other than conscious. How could I put this? Indirect. He would tell stories like Erickson did. He'd tell a lot of stories, told a lot of stories. And Jason Kemp, Morabian. Yes, thank you. Yes, Albert Morabian, I believe. 1967, the study came out. Thank you, Jason Kemp. Awesome. Thank you for that. Beautiful. I didn't need to clean my desk after all. Anyway, so where was I? So what we want to do in this class today, if possible, is to pay a little attention to that 38% and that 55% of that other than conscious communication, and recognize that when we speak hypnotically to people, it's not so much the words that we say. Yes, they're important. 7% is important. I teach this little class sometimes about language called the language of change. And I make a point of this. I say people, I give this whole long sort of soliloquy, like I'm absolutely positively certain that I can do it. So I have people picture in their mind something they want to do, and then say that whole phrase, I am absolutely positively certain that I can do it. And then I have them say it like this, is like, I am absolutely positively 100% certain that I can do it. And ask them how they feel about that. And then they variously change their communication to where they're going, I am absolutely 100%, 1,000, I can do it. And they say it like, Super Mouse or what was that kid's name? Mighty Mouse. Mighty Mouse. Yeah, I can do it. And it's different, of course. So I demonstrate pretty clearly that the 55% very much important, 38% very much more important than the 7%. But then I change that whole long soliloquy thing, and I say I can't do it. I just put a apostrophe T, can do it. And then you know what? That 7% makes a difference, doesn't it? So the words you say, yes, make a difference, very much so, yes. And how you say them, even more important. So that's what we're going to be playing this at. And before we go any further, I just also do want to say this. For those of you who are here listening to me for the first time, I'm unused to, I'm not used to speaking just to a camera. I'm not used to webinars. I know you're out there. I can see the numbers, et cetera, and thank you for being here. But I'm used to having like interactions and communications with people like Jason who put in things in the question and answers. I'm not going to be paying too much attention to that because I do have certain things I want to get across. But I just want to say why I'm doing this is because I want you to take a class from me. I'm just going to put this up front here. Everyone knows that these launches, these summits are for selling something on the other end. I'm just going to be upfront with it. Yeah, I've got a class coming up. I've got an Ericksonian, neo-Ericksonian hypnosis class coming up, and I'd like you to be a part of it. I don't want you to necessarily, be a part of it just because it's there. I'll give you a little taster, see if you like it. Not everybody's cup of tea, see how it works for you. But it's a good class. It's a really good class. You'll learn things that you won't learn anyplace else. And this is just one of those things that you probably won't learn anyplace else. But I do want to bring it to your attention today. So we'll tell you more about that class that's coming up. It'll be a 4-month course spread out actually over 5 months. It'll end in end of September. Twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, and an optional Saturday once a month, just a sort of a fun day. We'll just play with the patterns that we've been doing, et cetera. You can attend it or not. You can listen to the recordings. Everything's being recorded, including today. Thank God I remembered to record it. It's embarrassing. It's being, oops, not quite everything's being recorded. But we are recording everything. It will be recorded, trust me. So you can watch the live presentations interactively with me. It's live with you and everybody interacting, or watch the videos and get it that way. I encourage practice groups, et cetera, along the way. But there's a lot to learn. And why I call it neo-Ericksonian hypnosis, you might be wondering. And some of you might know the answer to this already, but I will elaborate just briefly. I've mentioned already that much of my training, in the early days at least, came from Dave Dobson. Dave is not Milton Erickson. His work is parallel to, very similar to, and different from Milton Erickson's work. I learned NLP from Tony Robbins at first. Tony Robbins was, in the old days, an NLP trainer. That's what he did at first in 1984, 85. He was an NLP trainer. He was teaching, like many other people do, NLP practitioner courses, NLP master practitioner courses. I took those from him. He didn't do the trainer's training, although he made me a master trainer along the way. I guess because he liked me or something. I don't know. He needed trainers, so he made me one. But nevertheless, I took my trainer's training later on from Richard, et cetera, Richard Bandler. Learned a lot from Robert Dilts along the way. But what I found was that everybody who learned from Erickson, because Milton had died before I got to him, everybody that I was able to train with had taken their own kind of unique take on what Erickson was doing. Just like I was saying before, Milton and Dave both taught by telling stories, and you could sort of interpret them yourself, for what it meant to you. So these people who were taking from Milton did that. And one person said, oh, it's all about the language, or one person said it's all about the state, or one person said it's all about the stories. And they would take their own little take on it. And then I took classes from them. So which one is Ericksonian hypnosis? And is Dave Dobson doing Ericksonian hypnosis? I don't think so. And then what about all that NLP stuff that was derived from Ericksonian hypnosis, but isn't Ericksonian hypnosis? It's NLP stuff. Change personal history, sleight of mouth. It's all great stuff, works really well, but it's not Ericksonian per se. So to call it Ericksonian hypnosis, when I never even met the man, I met his wife, I went to his house, I met his daughter, Betty Alice, I got to be friendly with her, but I never met him. So how can I call it Ericksonian hypnosis? Can't really say that is accurately the case. But much of what we're doing, I think, today is building on what he left behind. We have the advantage, really, we have a huge advantage over Milton Erickson. And that is we learned from Milton Erickson. He didn't have a Milton Erickson to learn from, to stand on the shoulders of giants like that. He didn't have him. We had him, right? So we can stand on his shoulders and go from there. Not saying that we can equal his genius, but we can do a lot of the things that he did because he did them first, and we can understand them and codify them and learn them. That is the effort we're going to do. So one of the people that I learned from along the way was a woman named Christina Hall. Excuse me. Christina Hall was a master trainer of NLP from, I think she was the co-president of the Society of NLP with Richard Bandler along the way, something like that. At any rate, she was one of the early adopters of NLP, and brilliant woman, brilliant teacher. And I went to a training of hers once about language, and she did this really curious thing. She said that she was at a seminar with Richard, and that Richard Bandler had this unique way of teaching, that he would say, give all these amazing ideas and concepts, and then you say, okay, now here's what I want you to do. And he'd give people these directions that maybe were coming at you really fast, and maybe they're a little bit confusing, a lot of steps. Then he'd say, okay, go do it. And then he'd just sort of walk away. And people would be like, do you know what to do? I don't know what to do. Do you know what to do? And people would be placed in this place of discovery. They didn't get step-by-step, first do one, and then, step-by-step directions. And he wanted that state. He wanted that state. He wanted people to be discovering what was happening. And that's great. That's one of the great things about learning by teaching, telling stories, et cetera, is that people interpret it themselves. That's a great thing. And I like to think that we can do that and be a little bit more right brain, codified, left brain, whatever, codified at the same time. We can do both. We can understand it consciously and other than consciously. So what Christina was telling me is she was at one of these seminars where Richard Bandler did exactly that. And she went up to him and said, Richard, I'm confused. I don't understand. And he turns and he says to her, that's right. Sometimes you can be confused and not know, yet continue to learn, because your conscious mind is very smart, and your unconscious also learns in a variety of ways. So why not let it do the work for you for a while? And she was like, blah, blah, blah. She was still confused, still in a trance. And so he said it again, exactly the same way. And then she was still in a perhaps even deeper trance, and he turned and walked away and let her figure it out and sort it out. But what's fascinating to me about that statement is that, I'm just going to reorganize here a little bit for a second, don't go away, is that if you read the words themselves, just the words themselves, and I'll read them to you, just the way that probably, any normal person would read them. They make perfect sense. But I want you to think, you know what? Hold on a second. It's just you. I'm talking to you. Stop for a second. Just put yourself in Christina Hall's shoes, all right? I want you to feel this for yourself. What happens to you in your brain when you hear this statement like this? And then I'll read it to you the way normal people would read it. I'll do it one more time the way I did it, and you just see what happens. So imagine that you're yourself, maybe not Christina Hall, maybe you're just yourself. You're at a seminar with Richard Bandler, and he gives you these confusing directions. And then you go up to him. He's still in the room. You say, excuse me, Dr. Bandler or Mr. Bandler or Richard, I'm confused. I don't understand. And he turns to you and says, that's right. Sometimes you can be confused and not know, yet continue to learn, because your conscious mind is very smart, and your unconscious also learns in a variety of ways. So why not let it do the work for you for a while? Now, listen to the way normal people would say this phrase. Normal people would say it like this. Well, or that's right. Sometimes you can be confused and not know yet. Continue to learn because your conscious mind is very smart and your unconscious also learns in a variety of ways. So why not let it do the work for you for a while? It's logical, right? But what did it feel like in your brain? What did it feel like in your experience when you heard it that way? Was it nearly as trance-inducing? I don't think so. For most people that I've ever done this with live, it's not. I'm not going to be able to take a show of hands or whatever from this webinar setup, but just notice for yourself what it was like. One of the contributions that Milton Erickson made, I believe, to the hypnosis world is this contribution. In the early days of NLP, I'm sorry, early days of hypnosis, I'm talking 200 years ago, 150 years ago, James Braid named what Anton Franz Mesmer was doing with mesmerism and animal magnetism. James Braid named it hypnosis almost 200 years ago, 1850-ish. So it's been around a long time by various names, mesmerism, etc. But hypnosis was given that name, that moniker in around 1850 by James Braid, a Scottish physician who was curious about, wow, if there's no such thing as animal magnetism, how's this guy getting such results? Maybe it's the trance that he's putting him in, this mesmerized state that they're putting him in. So they created these things. James Braid created this thing called a Braid fascination device. You've probably seen it. It looks something like this. By the way, I teach a lot on whiteboards. I appreciate the PowerPoint stuff. I really do. And this is a lot faster. This is the Braid fascination device. He had this thing on a turntable, right? And it spun. And as it spun, it looked like you were like going into this vortex, or if it was going the opposite way, then you're going out from the vortex. Either way, it was this really interesting optical illusion kind of thing. And what happened then is that you created eye fixation. He captured your attention by doing this Braid fascination device. It's fascinating. Later on, you're probably aware of this. Later on, they said, well, let's not do that. Let's do something much more simple. And I don't have a good prop here, but let's just use this. Just follow the swinging watch. Or this is my headphones, but they've, the swinging watch thing. Again, for the same idea that you get this fascination, you capture their attention. Milton Erickson didn't do it that way. Milton Erickson never did these things. Milton Erickson told stories. Milton Erickson used phrasing that was unusual, captured their attention. Well, you know that you can sometimes be confused and not know, yet continue to learn because... And those pauses were like, waiting. By the way, those of you who are Richard Bandler fans are probably noticed that a lot of times in his tonality, the way he uses tonality a lot these days is he uses he uses these phrases, which are purposeful. It sounds like he's being like, oh, a guy from what's it called, Toastmasters would be on his back. You're saying too often, Mr. Bandler, is it's bad. It's bad communication. Can't use those all the time. You got to clean those up. Don't do this anymore. What Richard's doing to stop the brain from thinking, so put it on hold so I can offer the suggestions. It's kind of like music, really. Mozart once said this. I don't know how meaningful this would be to you. I don't know if you know what doilies or lacework are anymore, but back in Mozart's day, doilies and lacework are very important things. And he said, the difference between just a tablecloth and a lace tablecloth are the holes. The holes give you patterns. That the sounds of music are important, but the silences in the music are just as important. You have to have the silences in music to have patterns. Interesting, isn't it? So we're looking to add silence and add pauses, but at places where you still are capturing their attention. I once had an experience when I used to work at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital. 1994, I heard that they were putting together this department of complementary medicine to carry out experiments, basically to see what alternative therapies, medicines, whatever alternative therapies like hypnosis, acupuncture, acupressure, qigong, yoga, many things were involved. Which ones of those would work as a complementary medicine to, what they're also going to get at the hospital, of course, surgery, medicine, et cetera. And so I volunteered to be part of this process. I was there for 6 years. It became not just a volunteer thing, but I got paid to be there after a while. And I worked with a lot of different patients, mostly pre-surgical, pre-heart surgery patients. I was working in the department of surgery, so pre-surgical hypnosis. Along the way, I had to have a surgery of my own. I had a hernia. I was training for the New York City Marathon. And one day after training, I came back to the apartment. I did a 20-mile run from my apartment in Brooklyn out to Coney Island and back, and got in the shower, and there's this weird bulge in my abdomen. It's like, what the heck is that? And it's never been there before, and it's pretty pronounced. It was kind of weird and unsettling. So I went to a doctor, and he said, oh, that's called a hernia. And I said, oh, gosh, don't like the sound of that. What can I do about this? Can I do some yoga? Can I take some herbs? Can I eat yogurt? what can I do to take care of this thing? And he said, well, you can have surgery now, or you could have surgery later. And I said, thank you, doc. Don't quit your day job. That was pretty funny. But I figured as long as I had to have the surgery, I might as well make it interesting. So I found, since I was working at a hospital, I found somebody who was related to somebody who was a surgeon who was willing to do a hernia surgery without using anesthesia. I wanted to just use hypnosis. And I did. This is a long story, but there's a real good point here. I found something out, and that is that this way of capturing attention through Ericksonian, this kind of phrasing that I was just talking about, is really important when you want to, keep somebody in a trance just vocally. Because here's the deal. I'm going to go back to the slides for a second. When, I have share screen, I think I'd be good at this by now. Sharing screen, here we go. So playing from the current slide. This is literally a script. I hope it's nobody here's script that I literally downloaded from the internet about half an hour ago, maybe 45 minutes ago. And I just went online, said hypnosis scripts, and pulled one down. This is what most hypnosis scripts look like. They're paragraphs, they're sentences. There's no waiting for the pause. There's no planned pauses. So you can imagine a person might be saying this like, then make a fist with both hands and tense all your muscles, just as though you're trying to pull everything across the line at the same time. Really tense all the muscles in your body, mentally release and physically experience the sensation of being stuck. And just as these annoying feelings, this is not, to my mind, going to be putting me in much of a trance. This is the way a lot of people are trained, or I guess the word's trained, in hypnosis. And the person that I needed to have be part of my experience doing surgery was a hypnotist in the same department as I was in, who was trained like this. It's a long story as to why I needed to have her there, but basically her mother was the surgeon. So in order to get the surgeon to do the surgery, needed her. So she was a lovely person, really good hypnotist, but different style from me. And because I'm a pig-headed guy, I didn't like her style so much. So she would say things that basically came a full sentence. And so I would then, my conscious mind could then evaluate whether it was true or not. So she would say, okay, now your arm is getting very, very heavy. Your arm is getting very, very heavy. And I'm going like, my arm's not that heavy. And now she's do this thing, and now you're getting numb here. You're getting totally numb. You feel nothing. It's just totally numb. And I'm thinking, that's enough. And then she's pinched it and said, and you feel no pain. I'm going like, first of all, don't say pain. So my conscious mind is going like, yeah. And then it's like, oh, that hurts kind of, you know. So because she was using these full sentences and not capturing my attention, I was consciously still very much present in this situation and not liking it very much. But I wanted to go through this. So I just, oh yeah, I feel no pain. That's good. Wow, yeah, you can pinch even harder. Sure, no problem. And I was doing some self-hypnosis with myself. When it came to the final day for surgery, long story short, I convinced her that I just wanted to listen to a tape of ocean wave sounds. But in that tape of ocean wave sounds, I had a track. She probably knew that. She was a very smart person. I had a track of my own voice talking as well. So she was there doing her thing, and I was also listening to me talking in my way. Pre-surgical hypnosis, well, surgical hypnosis actually, because we tended to do complementary medicine in the hospital. People would get pre-surgical hypnosis that gave them lots of good suggestions for quick recovery, et cetera. But during surgery, they used anesthesia at the hospital. There's no, it was me alone that did this one operation without anesthesia. It wasn't a common practice. It was interesting though. And by the way, there was a period of time, just a quick story, because you're probably wondering, did it work? It's like, yeah, it worked. But there was one period of time, a funny little thing. There's a pulse oximeter, I believe it's called, this little thing that clips onto your finger to take your pulse and oxygen level, I guess. And they have it there for one reason only, because when you are under anesthesia, they can't tell if you're in pain or not to, you know, up the dosage of the anesthesia or not, unless they measure your heart rate, because you can't move and you can't scream. So you can't communicate like, oh, that hurts, unless your heart rate starts going up. If they notice your heart rate going up, then they add a little bit more anesthesia to bring the levels down. I didn't need that thing. I was conscious. I mean, I was not conscious because I was in trance, but I mean, I was not anesthetized, right? But at some point or another, I guess I got so relaxed or something that it ceased picking up my heart rate. I was still alive. I was still having a heart rate, but they weren't picking it up. So it looked on the monitor like I was flatlining. I wasn't, but they didn't know that. So they said, you okay? I said, yeah, I'm fine. You know, that should have convinced them, but they wanted me to move it to the other finger. So I brought myself back from the beach. I was very nicely ensconced and doing some pleasant activities in Hawaii, you know. That's the kind of point to anesthesia hypnosis, is just to get out of Dodge, you know, get out of town. I'll leave my body here. You do what you need to do. I'm going to the beach. So I was far away from New York. I was at this beach, but I had to come back and move the pulse oximeter to the other finger. So, okay, all there, because you're alive. Good. It's like, I could have told you that. Anyway. So, yeah. So this kind of script that we're talking about here is kind of thing that she was doing and that most people get trained in doing. It's all about the 7%, all about those words. We want to have holes in our cloth. We want to have some space. We want to have some, you know, patterns, and grab the attention through the stories that we're telling, through the way we're talking, right? So this next slide, let me see if I can turn my screen again with nice and smooth ease, is the way we do it here. So when you write a script with me, basically, by the way, you write a script for training purposes. We don't use scripts in actual, you know, hypnotherapy. And probably some of you have already noticed this, both sides are the same, but it's because I didn't have a longer script to play with. This is PowerPoint, not an actual script. So the way this is planned out is to go all the way down one side in little phrases like this with lots of space, lots of recognizing that at some point or other, you're going to pause. And then you go to the other column and go down this way. But here's the real trick here. I'm going to tell you the real trick is that it doesn't have to be a script so much like this. It could be pretty much anything that you would say normally, but you pause according to the client's breathing rate. You pause according to the client's breathing rate. So you watch them. Stephen Gilligan, one of my trainers, one of the guys that studied with Erickson that I studied with after he studied with Erickson, Stephen Gilligan, great, I was going to say NLP guy. He started with Bandler and Gunderez in NLP and then met Erickson and stayed with Erickson. But he said he wants to do this talk that was a very short talk ultimately, but it was called the 3 Keys to Successful Hypnotherapy. 3 Keys to Hypnosis, to Successful Hypnotherapy. And I've memorized his speech, so I can tell it to you now. Key number 1 is observe. So you keep your eyes open, you observe your client. You keep your eyes open and observe your client. It's okay if they close their eyes. It's great if they close their eyes. It's great if they go into trance, and you can go into something of a trance too, but you keep your eyes open and observe your client. Key number 1, observe. Key number 2, observe. Key number 3, observe. So in review, that'd be observe, observe, observe. Got it? Key number 1 is to observe, and 2 and 3. We must observe our clients. Keep your eyes open, watch them. So one of the things you're watching for is their breathing rate. And what you want to do as a hypnotherapist, and this will make anything you're doing better already, is to only speak on their exhale. So you can take that script that's all just block letters. You can take all that stuff and just say it, but stop talking when they inhale. Only speak on their exhalation. And that means that sometimes you'll stop talking at rather strange places within the sentence structure. And because you stopped in odd places in the sentence structure, they're going to be, part of their brain is going to be going like, what's next? Where's it going? You'll have captured their attention for that period of time. Observe their breathing, speak only on the exhalation. Sounds like, oh yeah, I can do that. It's not easy to do in actual life. It's easy once you practice it. And that's one of the things we do here. That's one of the reasons we spend 4 months on this practice. And we spend, an hour and a half once a week, or actually twice a week, because it'd be Tuesday afternoons and Thursday evenings, trying to make it okay for people who work 9 to 5. We started doing these classes online during COVID, so nobody was working. So 1 to 2, great, no problem. But for some people, there's a problem, so they watch the tapes now. But for this upcoming class, we're going to see what it's like to have one class on Tuesdays at 1 till 2:30 and one class on Thursdays from 6 to 7:30 to accommodate some people who work, or maybe just different time zones. Maybe it's convenient for you. Maybe one's convenient, maybe the other's not, but that's what we're going to try. So the reason we do this is so that we have time to practice. We have time to integrate it. We have time to really develop skills. One of the things I learned from playing the piano and also being a piano teacher is it takes a little bit of time to learn a skill that you really want to be able to perform. You want to be able to do, replicate the skills of the teacher. You want to be able to do it yourself. You want to be like Erickson, right? Not just say, well, that Erickson guy is great. I listened to lots of his stuff. It's like, no, your stuff. How do you do your stuff? So we're going to make that ingrainable. Is that the word? Integratable, so that you can integrate it into your systems, in your bodily systems throughout this time over the 4 months that we have coming up. Does it make sense? I think it does. Thank you for saying so too. We were just talking to a reflection of myself. And I do that all the time anyway, but usually in the bathroom and usually singing songs at the hairbrush. Anyway, I digress. So yeah, that's what we'll be doing. So let me give you an example of this. So one of the ways that I have learned that this is useful, one of the things that I've learned that's useful about it is not only for the phrasing that it does, but it does something else that's very important. You probably are aware that breathing is a very essential and basic system for a human being. And that when people who are in rapport with each other are in a deep sense of rapport, they tend to breathe at about the same levels. One of the ways you can create rapport with a person is to match and mirror many of their systems, if not as many as you can calibrate of their systems. One of the biggest ones, most important ones, is their breathing. I remember watching or listening to a whole modeling process by Bandler and Grinder, modeling Frank Fairley of provocative therapy. And they spent all this time watching Frank Fairley and modeling Frank Fairley. And after listening to this whole modeling thing that they did, basically they said, Frank breathed at the same rate as his clients. That's provocative therapy right for you, right there. Obviously, there's a lot more to it than that, but that's what they came away from on this recording, is that Frank breathed at the same rate as his clients. Okay, that's good. That's really good. That's really important. Actually, if you do that, things will be better. If you do only that, yeah, things will be better. If that's the only thing you take away from this training today, breathe at the same rate as your clients. You create a deep sense of rapport with your client. And an interesting thing takes place as well. You sort of get under the same wavelength as them. And it's amazing how much communication takes place both ways. You know, the way that you want to impart your suggestions in your hypnotic languaging, but also just you pick things up from the person. I cannot tell you how many times. It's a lot. It's thousands. It's countless times. I don't know how many times I've, sort of intuited something during a process, during a trance session with someone, where I've said something just because it felt right to say it. And that person, after the session was over, would be like, how did you know to say that thing about a red Schwinn bicycle? That's exactly the bike I used to ride when I was a kid. It's amazing you said that. I mean, it just happens frequently. It's kind of spooky. But those are the kinds of things that happen when you're in that deep sense of rapport, when your bodies are matched so much, your posture and everything is matching and the breathing is taking place at the same rate. It's amazing what kind of communication takes place, consciously and other than consciously. By the way, a little bit of an aside for a moment. That phrase, other than conscious communication, comes from Dave Dobson. One of the reasons I believe neo-Ericksonian hypnosis is a better way of putting it is like, who am I to teach Ericksonian hypnosis? Like I said, I never even met the guy. The most I could do is parrot what Gilligan told me and, what people like David Gordon told me and, whatever. I never learned it directly from Erickson, although I've watched countless hours of his videos, et cetera. But the phrase neo-Ericksonian hypnosis is just frankly more accurate. I don't do traditional just Ericksonian hypnosis. I do things that I've learned from Bandler. I do things I learned from Dobson. I do learn things I figured out on my own. Neo-Ericksonian hypnosis. It was Dobson's insistence on that greater accuracy that caused me to want to coin that phrase, or at least borrow that phrase. I think I've heard it from someone else before. I just said, no, but God, that's a great idea. But Dobson's idea of the other than conscious, he said, it's a more accurate representation, because to say it's your unconscious, you're not unconscious. Unconscious is like the people in the hospital who are anesthetized. Those people, I remember walking past some gurneys of people who are anesthetized thinking, is this a corpse? People are just not moving, barely breathing, they're anesthetized. They are unconscious, unconscious. Somebody who's subconscious is to indicate that it's lower than, like submarine. It's lower. It's a lower form of consciousness. And that's just inaccurate as well, because a lot of times our other than conscious is like a higher consciousness, isn't it? And so what Dave said is that anything that's just not in your consciousness is other than conscious. And it includes the things that might be happening unconsciously or subconsciously, but also other than super consciously, or, all those things as well. And that everything we do, we're able to do because of our other than conscious mind. This communication that's happening right now, when you stop and think about it, it's kind of a miracle, isn't it? I mean, wow. I'm not able to do what I'm doing consciously. I'm thinking thoughts, and then I'm forming things with my mouth, passing air over my larynx and my tongue and my teeth and my lips, and I'm making these sounds that then go into this microphone. Well, the rest of it is just technology. But then, frankly, if you were just here listening to me one-to-one, forget about the technology. Just you and me talking is a miracle, sort of, when you stop and think about it. You can't do it consciously, because I'm making all these sounds that come out as language, and then they're coming into your ear and being decoded from all just these garbled-gook sounds into language, and your brain goes, oh yeah, I know what you mean. I get it. That's other than conscious. That is not your conscious mind. Your conscious mind is at the end of that process going like, yeah, I got it, I understand. It's a gift. Your consciousness is a gift from your other than conscious. So Dave's insistence on this more accurate representation is why he called it other than conscious communication. Includes body language, includes this facial things, it includes tonality. What we're going to be talking about tomorrow is more of, or not tomorrow, the next time we meet 2 days on Thursday of this week, is we're going to talk about how to then form sentences in a way that create these, what are known as embedded commands, or hypnotic language patterns. So one of the great things that give you a little preview of what we'll be spending more time on Thursday. One of the great things about pausing like this, with the way we're speaking on, not speaking on their inhalation, only speaking on their exhalation, that those pauses give us the opportunity to emphasize certain words. And when you emphasize certain words, they come across to the other than conscious mind as suggestions. So as an example, let me give you an example. Oh, you know what? I'll give you a very concrete example. How about that? This will cover, well, maybe I'll save that. I'll give you a different example. Tonality. Many of you have heard or learned about things that we call, sorry about that squeaky noise, tie downs, or tag questions. Excuse me one sec. I see a few in this little trance that I'm doing here. But for instance, you are in a trance, aren't you? You are in a trance, aren't you? Normal sentence. You are in a trance, aren't you? Very normal sentence. You are in a trance, aren't you? Now, tonality. I'm going to say this in two different tonalities. And again, don't take my word for it. One of the things that, by the way, Dobson also emphasized, is said, don't take everything I'm saying just because I'm saying it as gospel, as truth. Be curious about it. Put it to the test. Figure out if it's really true for you. So try this on for size. See if it works for you. I'm going to say this sentence with two different tonalities, and I want you to notice the difference and see what happens in your brain when I say them in these two different ways. Okay, so first is, you're in a trance, aren't you? And then I could say it like this. You're in a trance, aren't you? So traditionally in American speech, at least American English, that tonality going up at the end, aren't you, is in fact what we think of as a question, right? So the questioning tonality. So this is a line going up, indicating a tonality sweep up. You are in a trance, aren't you? Versus, and that is like I said, consistent to a question. So although this question mark is here, we don't necessarily have to say it that way. What if you said it instead, you are in a trance, aren't you? And the tonality goes down at the end, like I said it the first time. You are in a trance, aren't you? In a way, I'm not asking you, I'm telling you. I'm telling you you're in a trance. Just drop my pen. Pen is in a trance. You are in a trance, aren't you? For most of you, probably what happened is what happens for most people I've done this with live when I have interaction abilities, is that people think, yeah, I just, basically stopped thinking then. It's like, yeah, I guess I am. But when you say it, you're in a trance, aren't you? Suddenly, it invites the person to start searching through the different cabinets in their brain and go like, I don't know, let me find out. Am I in a trance? I don't think so, but maybe I am. I don't can't tell. So they start wondering and questioning. So the tonality makes a huge difference. Huge difference. So again, 7% important. Yeah, true. Okay. 38% tonality. Oh, excuse me, even more important. And then perhaps watching that physiology, paying attention to the breathing and speaking on the exhalation, 55%, even more important. Now, interestingly, a number of years ago, I was working for a guy named John Morgan Seminars. Had met him at a Dave Dobson workshop, actually back in the 80s. And I don't want to date myself, but it was the late 80s. Some of you go like, well, that's before I was born. Yes, thanks. Anyway, so I met John back there in the 80s, and somewhere in the 90s or somewhere around that, he shifted from being a radio DJ to doing hypnosis workshops. He would go around because he knew radio stations, he knew that they would sometimes have commercial time that was available because the people weren't advertising, right after Christmas, as an example. January is dead for radio advertising. So he said, hey, listen, tell you what, I'll make some commercials. I'm a radio DJ. I'm really good at this. I'll make some commercials and we'll play them on your station, and I'll come to your town and I'll do a seminar and we'll split the proceeds. And the radio station was going like, sure, why not? Got nothing to lose. So he would fill up these seminars and he'd go and do these places in different cities and do hypnosis for weight loss and for smoking cessation. And frankly, one of the things that he did, most of what he was doing was derivative of Dave Dobson work. He did Dave's beach trip and a lot of Dobsonian things there at these workshops. And then he got tired of traveling, or his knees were getting tired of traveling or something like that. And he called me up and said, hey, you want to take over for me? And so we negotiated a bit, and ultimately I said, yes, I would like to do those seminars. It was fun to do lots of seminars without having to work to put the seminars together, like I'm doing right now. No, now that I think of it. But it was fun. I just go from city to city. Yeah. And there was a point to this story when I started it. That's one of the hazards of storytelling. Yeah. So yeah, I'll get to I'll finish that story tomorrow. That's known as an open loop. Yes, I meant to do that. So on Thursday, I will finish that story, and you can wonder what it's all about up until then. That was pretty good. But seriously now, so seriously, when we come back on Thursday, when we see each other again on Thursday, I will have plenty of many examples. I've got a much better PowerPoint laid out for you for Thursday, which will have plenty of examples. And by the way, when I put together my language of change workshop, I took this section from my hypnosis manual that you will get when you take this class. took a section of my hypnosis manual that was like, like 15 pages long and, one language pattern after another. And I just spread it out with lots of white space between each pattern, because when people were doing this, they would get a printed manual like this one, a printed manual. And they'd have all these pages, blank space in it with which to write their own language patterns. That was the point, not to learn how to read scripts, but how to create your own, write your own scripts, write your own language patterns. So you'll notice that we'll just be going through one pattern after another with enough time to practice them. This will be the way that you actually do this in class, so that you become facile at being able to put together these language patterns. So I promised you an example. So I'm going to go back to this page here, share my screen one last time for today. And look at this example here. So this one is an example that I put together. And because I'm not watching you and watching your breathing, I'm just going to read this left-hand column. Again, it's the same on both sides. I could read the right-hand column, it'd be exactly the same. They're duplicates. But the way this is intended to be written, if you were practice scripts, you write down one side of the column, and then you write down the other side of the column. So one way I might say this is like this. I believe I can't really see that top line because this control is in the way. There we go. And as you drift even deeper and deeper into that nice, comfortable trance state of awareness, becomes focused on that growing sensation in one of your hands, or 2, 3, drifting, 4, you know that, 5, this is the same feeling, you know so well. You feel so comfortable feeling this feeling of comfort, of ease, because you know it's your feeling in trance, aren't you? Already enjoying the process of learning, even while you may not know what it is that you are learning, yet you are. And that is nice to know, isn't it? All right, to let go and let your unconscious mind take care of that for you now, even as your conscious mind continues drifting unconsciously. Anyway, something like that. You'd read it kind of like that, with lots of silence, maybe even more than what I was doing. I admit I'm perhaps feeling a little nervous reading to this camera, but you do it like that. And you'd have those silences and you'd capture their attention. And when we come back on Thursday, you'll learn even more about what to say, what maybe that 7% is to say it when you combine that 7% with the 38 and the 55% of awareness of the auditory and the physiology of the communication. So thank you for being here today. It's an honor for me to have you here. It really is, and I appreciate you doing it. Whether or not you're watching right now or watching the recording, I look forward to seeing you on the next time we meet together. And I do invite you to also consider being part of the class. It's one of those things that, be over before you know it, but boy, you'll learn a lot. You will learn a lot and become an excellent hypnotherapist. See you Thursday. This has been the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure seeing you again. Hope to see you again real soon. Come back next week when we have another gripping and exciting episode of the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. And if you want to, you can find out more about us, each and every one of us, at essentialcoachingskills.com. Thanks.